On this program, Anatoly Kovocha, one of Russia's leading test pilots, demonstrates the power and agility of the Sukhoi Su-27 flanker, one of the world's great super fighters. From its arrival in the West in 1989, the aircraft was put through a series of breathtaking display routines, incorporating the now legendary tail slide and Cobra maneuvers. The impact made by the Su-27, with its revolutionary design, was to immediately set new standards in fighter aircraft production.
A couple of designers in Mikoyan who wanted to produce the best handling fighter wing that anybody had yet done. That was their personal aim. And with what we would call PV, private venture money, with the budget that Mikoyan had got for its own internal development, they set about trying to develop such a wing, these two lads. They had an awful lot of time in wind tunnels. 60,000 hours was mentioned, and they were designing a wing, not an aeroplane, a wing. Just the wing. No engines, no cockpit, no tail, just the wing. They wanted a wing that was going to be as reliable and as steady at a range of angle of attacks as they could find. They very quickly, when working on this, realised that they had to have a long nose, and that the nose was a key element in how the vortices were set up from the nose to feed into the wing, to keep the wing stable at high angles of attack and stop the Dutch roll that we had experienced with our handling page 115. So once they got this nose, this slightly curved nose, and its associated strength at the beginning of the wing and so on, going, and they then were able to demonstrate these superior qualities in the tunnel, they then set about putting on fins and rudders and cockpits and engines and intakes, and spoiling the original concept as little as possible. That was how they did it. When they got what we now know as MiG-29 together, they went along to their internal bosses, and the bosses just laughed you out of court and said, no, we're not going to do that. And these chaps were really, really disappointed, of course. It's like any research group working inside a big organisation. They had not been able to sell their ideas, their revolutionary ideas, to perhaps the more conservative senior people in the company. And they left MiG. And they went to work for Sukhoi. And when they got to Sukhoi, they discussed these ideas there. And Sukhoi took a different view. They said, oh, you know. And so Sukhoi had a look at it themselves, and they thought it was excellent. So Sukhoi then set about designing what we now know as the Su-27. And this eventually finished up, a model of this, in the tunnels that were now shared. They were above all of the aircraft companies. Do you see what I mean? The aircraft companies had their own facilities, but in the end, the main Russian facilities were centralised and shared. And of course, as soon as this model started appearing in these central facilities, then of course Mikoyan realised what was going on. And there was this immediate decision taken that Sukhoi would continue with this design to do a big, heavy, long-range interceptor, and Mikoyan would take the same concept and would do the short, tactical range, multi-role version of it.
I didn't have any role in the development of the Su-27. I started flying this aircraft after it was already tested, and my impression is that the Su-27 is a very pure piece of machinery, not only in terms of design perfection and flying characteristics, but also in terms of reliability and safety. These planes came to me from a production factory. We only fly them because we have never had any technical problems with them. We carry out some tests concerning the wide angles of attack and the Cobra maneuver. We have an agreement with the design office at the firm Sukhoi about using the Su-27. The results of this advanced research could be used in the development of planes like the Su-33 and the Su-35.
Для того, чтобы сравнить все это корректно,
It is not easy to compare our aircraft with those from the West, but on the basis of what is happening here, I can tell you that we all fly under equal conditions. Planes like the F-16, F-18 and the Su-27 are the same generation aircraft, and all fly with the same weight. This being quite obvious. You can see this when we start, when we take off. You can check the time when we finish the first part of the loop. You can also check the speed on the wide angles of attack. What is the turning time? What is the landing distance? All these things are quite visible to a trained specialist's eye. It is easy to compare, and I'm proud that the Su-27 comes out more favorably in this comparison.
I mean, it was a big surprise, wasn't it, in 1988 when the Russians pitched up at Farnborough with these two MiGs. I mean, it was the first time in the West, we'd seen any of their military airplanes up close too. I mean, I guess the odd military attaché and semi-professional spy wandering around Russia had seen a few things, but the ordinary bulk of the guys, you know, in the aircraft industry in the West had not seen these things. Come Paris the following year, they not only bought a couple of MiGs, they the Russians, but of course Sukhoi turned up with Su-27. And I shall never forget watching his first display at Paris. I was standing on the British Aerospace Chalet with a whole raft of very senior people, some of them service officers, Royal Air Force officers, some of them designers and test pilots in British Aerospace. And Viktor Pugachev, who was their chief test pilot, he did a 360, just an ordinary 360-degree turn in this thing. And Peter Martin, who was a big friend of mine, and we'd been on a Hunter squadron together, he looked up from his watch and he said, "That only took 10 seconds." Now, a 360-degree turn done in 10 seconds means that you have an average turn rate of 36 degrees a second. We at that time were hoping that our next generation fighter airplane would be able to achieve 25. Here was an airplane, you know, I mean, and turning when you have forward-facing armament is what it's all about. You've got to turn to bring your armament to bear on the enemy. And he said, that was 10 seconds. And at that point, the chap broke onto the downwind leg and we thought, well, it's all over, he's just going to land now. And then suddenly on the downwind leg, this aeroplane just went like this. And flew around the corner and landed. And we couldn't believe what we had seen. It may seem a little strange if I say that what you see at an air show has implications for what a military airplane can do in war. Because some people would see an air show as just a circus act. But if you're an insider and if you're in the business of developing and flight testing fighters, you can recognize limits on how those airplanes are maneuvered. And equally, you can recognize when the limits are not there. And we saw these aircraft being taken to the vertical, come to a stop, slide back down, light the reheat, and fly away. Not once, not twice, but time after time, routinely. Now this particular manoeuvre is a very demanding one, not as you enter it, but as you recover from it, for any jet fighter. It's demanding because once the airplane has gone up here and stopped and starts to slide back, the only way out of this manoeuvre is to lower the nose. And as the airplane comes down like this, the air is coming at it from 90 degrees underneath. It is, if you like, fully stalled. Now normally we only allow the air to come at our airplanes up to about 20 degrees, 20, 25. Why? Why do we have this angle of attack limit of 20, 25? Well, it means, it is because if you exceed that number, you're going to lose control of the aircraft, normally in roll, sometimes in yaw. Well, these guys were just doing this manoeuvre, seeing the 90 degrees angle of attack, falling down from dead steady, never any yaw off. They had got a symmetrical airflow on this airplane. How had they achieved it? Didn't know. What about the engines? As they were starting to slide back, they were lighting the reheat. You could physically see it. Now, our Western engines are normally very severely restricted in, or limited in how and when you can light the reheat. They didn't have any of these limits. So we were fascinated, and I thought this means that they can do manoeuvres, of course, in combat, which we wouldn't risk doing. Or, more importantly, even if they don't want to actually come to a stop, they are not all the time thinking in combat, I mustn't get my airspeed get below so much. I mustn't let the angle of attack get above so much, like you are in one of our traditional Western airplanes. So you've got half your mind thinking about the enemy when you fight a limited aircraft, an aircraft with hard limits on it. You've got half your mind thinking about what the enemy is doing, and half the mind thinking about what I must not do with my aeroplane from an aerodynamic point of view. That is not such a relaxed situation, of course, as sitting there thinking, well, I can do anything that is necessary in my attempt to follow this guy or to chase after him. So it just, it blew our minds what they had achieved.
Anatoly Kavocha was to become the center of media attention in 1989, following his miraculous escape from a MiG-29 crash during a display routine at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget.
Today, disaster smashed Soviet pride in their fighters. A Fulcrum performing a difficult maneuver at 500 feet developed engine failure. It lost power and slid into a vertical dive. The pilot ejected 2 seconds before impact. It seemed he could have no chance of survival. But medics who reached him almost immediately said pilot Anatoly Kavocha was conscious and able to speak. It was a miraculous escape, witnessed by other Soviet pilots. Kavocha is expected to leave hospital tomorrow, when flying demonstrations will resume at Le Bourget.
Что касается прошедшего, значит,
The International Committee decided that the damage to the right engine was caused by a bird, a medium-sized bird like a seagull. Most engines could not withstand this, and in my case the engine simply stopped. This is called the stalling breakdown of the engine, but at the time I was not worried about what it was called. All I knew was that the engine had lost power, and that it was impossible to continue flying with one engine. If I had been 100 meters higher, I could have saved the plane, but with considerable risk to the public. Even so, it was very risky to perform such flight tests above a crowd of 50,000 people. I lost some time when I tried to save the plane. I made several unsuccessful moves, which didn't allow me to leave the plane. And when I realized that all my attempts had come to nothing, I turned on the afterburner of the left and right engines with a small interval, in the hope that the right engine would return to normal. The left afterburner came on, but the right was still dead. In that situation, it was important to guess what would happen when the afterburner in the right engine would light up. The plane began to turn over, spinning on the right side. If the second engine had started to work, the trajectory of the plane would have changed, and the plane would have fallen in the direction of the crowd. It could have been dangerous, but fortunately, I didn't lose much time on this, about 2 seconds I think. Then I realized that the plane was spinning towards the earth, and I catapulted from the plane.
some people, when they watch the Cobra manoeuvre, of course, they are not so much impressed by the sort of things that I am amazed by. The stability of the thing, the routineness of it, the fact that they are confident to do it at low level. They just don't understand how it does it. You know, they think, well, how can he do that with an airplane? Well, the answer is it's the easiest thing in the world to fly an aircraft along straight and level, suddenly pull the control column back, tilt up the elevator or tailplane at the back end, generate an enormous downforce aerodynamically on the back. The nose goes up, you know. Goes up when you're sitting in it and looking at it, goes up when you're sitting in the stands and watching it fly. In fact, the nose doesn't go up, the tail goes down, because that's where the force is applied. But I mean, we're nitpicking here. What is tricky is allowing the nose to go up more than about 30 degrees. Because that is the point at which an ordinary wing stalls. All the airflow, which was smooth and streamlined and going about its ordered business, breaks down into a series of vortices, and in generally a mess. If you persist in that, and you could do with any airplane, you could persist with a Harrier, you could persist with the Tornado, an F-15, anything like. If you persist, you will now generate asymmetric disturbances. Your aeroplane will no longer remain symmetric, because the flow has broken down into a load of disorganized rubbish. And inevitably, that means that the nose will move to one side and the wing will roll down. This means that you finish up with more lift on one side than the other and the aircraft goes out of control. The trick with entering the Cobra is to have an airplane which, despite this very high angle of attack, remains totally symmetric left and right with its airflow pattern.
Несомненно, уникальное качество самолета, и очень мало самолетов.
Very few aircraft in the world have the necessary characteristics to perform this maneuver. No plane can do this in the way that the Su-27 and the Su-35 can. Similar maneuvers can be done by the MiG-29 and the F-18, but speed and attack angles are much lower. Cobra is the name of the maneuver, but the proper definition of this phenomenon is the dynamic braking of the aircraft as it goes out into large, post-breakdown angles of attack. This maneuver imitates the pose that the Cobra makes before attacking. From its conception in 1969, the Su-27 flanker continues to enthrall audiences worldwide with its spectacular display routines. Cobras, tail slides and unprecedented tight-turning maneuvers will always be associated with this Russian superfighter. Anatoly Kavocha, in displaying the aircraft, has proved beyond doubt that man and machine can be as one, in the name Su-27 flanker.
if you say to me, how do you recognise somebody's flying display? How do you look at a flying display and say, that is special? It's about several things. It's about the way the manoeuvres flow from one to the other. The real star just makes it look easy. It's the same when you see an ice dancer, it's the same, any of these things. It's the finer point, I know, and I'm struggling to express it in other than those general sort of ways. But when you watch somebody who is very competent, but still not in quite this class that I'm talking of, this top class, then you're more conscious that they do a manoeuvre, and there may well be 3 or 4 seconds then where the aircraft is flying straight and level and is getting itself ready to do the next manoeuvre, or it's getting itself ready for its next pass. You never see that when Anatoly flies. It goes smoothly from one manoeuvre into the next and is always perfectly positioned. That is the touch of somebody who is very special in this business. There was one F-16 guy, I should never forget, he was interviewed by somebody on French television. And this chap was in a state of mild shock, having seen this manoeuvre done. And he was an honest guy as well. And I should never forget, the TV interviewer said to him, what would you do if you found yourself in close combat with that guy? And he said, eject. And I thought, well, what a sensible guy.